Am I the asshole for cutting off my jealous mom? When I was going through puberty, my mom started comparing my body to hers. She would say things like, you know what, it's okay that you're not developing as quickly as I did, or that her boobs were already much bigger than mine were when I was 14. Here's a little backstory on my family. My mom has always been extremely dramatic and I think toxic. I feel bad calling her toxic. On the other hand, I have a great relationship with my dad. And my two siblings are both guys, so they don't have the same experience I did with my mom. My dad always acted as a buffer between me and my mom, even though my mom was the one that was starting all the fights. When I got into high school, I realized how attractive I was. Honestly, I had no clue that I was even a pretty girl. Looking back now, I realized that my mom really did make me feel like I was less than. When I started getting attention from boys in high school, I was really happy. I finally felt like I was seen. And because my mom wasn't there, I was able to thrive. Whereas in my house, I would even dress down in front of my mom just so that she wouldn't get jealous of me. The first time I brought a boy over to our house, my mom totally flipped out. She said that I was acting like an SLUT, but really, this boy was only a friend. My dad, thank God, told her that she needed to relax and that I was allowed to have friends. Eventually, I started dating a boy behind my mom's back. I did tell my dad though. My dad was actually happy for me. This boyfriend was like my best friend. I could tell him everything and he always responded really positively and gave me really good advice about my mom. But one day, one of my brothers let it slip that I had a boyfriend. My mom punished me for an entire month. My dad tried to intervene, but my mom went crazy. Here's the thing. She made me break up with him and then I caught her flirting with him. Part 2 is, am I the asshole for cutting off my jealous mom? When I caught her flirting with my now ex, who she made me break up with, I pretended like I didn't hear her. But she was flirting with him. She told him that he had really good muscles and that he looked a lot older than he was. Thank God, my ex didn't respond and went home. Afterwards, I confronted my mom and told her that I overheard the conversation. She told me that I was being a snob. I didn't talk to her for about 3 days. On the third day, she came crying to my room. She wanted us to make up. So she decided to take me shopping at the mall. And being the toxic person that she is, she managed to make everything about her. Tried on a bunch of clothes, which actually did look really good on her. Oh, by the way, my mom was a model back in the 90s, so she's kind of stuck in that mindset. She thinks she's the most beautiful person. She thinks she's the best. Anyway, when it was my turn to try on some clothes, she said that I looked a little too tubby, that I should maybe lose a few pounds. I told her that she hurt my feelings and she instantly apologized. Our relationship kept going like this up until I was 18. When I finally moved away for college, I was the happiest I'd ever been. Being away from my mom was like a breath of fresh air. But of course, it never stopped. My mom decided to come visit me to college and I knew that I needed to be prepared for that. When she came over to my dorm, I made sure it was super clean. Also, my grades were super good and I basically had a few friends but no boyfriend. When she came over to my apartment, she was like, oh, it's so simple. I was like, what do you mean? She said that I needed to decorate and show my personality more. She stayed with me for a total of 3 days and the whole time I was grinding my teeth. When she finally left, I was happy again. Then my dad came to visit. Hanging out with my dad was the best. Took me shopping for my apartment and made me feel so at home. My mom got jealous. Part 3 is, am I the asshole for cutting off my jealous mom? Disclaimers is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. Then she somehow managed to get jealous that my dad and I were getting along super well. She called my dad while my dad was visiting me and threw a tantrum about how she needed him to go home. So my dad cut his trip short just to go be with my insecure mother. After that, I really didn't speak to my mom for about 2 months. I couldn't believe that she always managed to make me feel less than. And somehow she always made everything about her. I reached out to my brothers and asked them if they ever felt the same about my mom, and they said no. My mom was totally different with them. She took care of them and doted on them. Probably because they're boys and not me, because I'm a girl. One day I decided to call my grandmother and I told her everything. That's when my grandma told me that my mom has always been that way and that I just shouldn't take it personally. Apparently when my mom was growing up, she did not have any girlfriends. She always liked staying away from other women to not have any competition. But I told my grandma that she's my mom and that she shouldn't see me as competition. Grandma suspects that something is wrong with my mom, so, I don't know if she's bipolar or something, but obviously I can't diagnose her. Thankfully, I have other women in my life, my grandma and 2 of my aunts. They act like my moms more than my own mother. When I graduated college, I was actually engaged. My fiance and I bought a house and we started planning our wedding. And of course, my mom wanted to help me plan it. I really didn't want this, but I decided to give her a chance. But once again, she managed to make everything about her. The entire time, she criticized my choices, even my wedding dress, which I absolutely loved, and it really did look good on me. She told me I needed to wear something more flattering. And then she ended up wearing my wedding dress in a different color. After the wedding, I decided to tell my dad and my brothers that I was going to cut my mom off. My dad begged me not to, but I still went ahead and did it. I called my mom and told her that I needed some time apart from her and that I did not want her calling me. Of Of course, she pretended like she had never done anything wrong in my life and that she's only been the perfect dedicated mother that she wishes she could be. Instead of arguing with her, I told her to just give me some space. She agreed to it, and I haven't spoken to her in about 3 months. My dad and grandma keep begging me to talk to her. I don't think my mom is sad at all. She's always posting to her Instagram. She goes to Pilates, brunch with her friends, and travels with my dad. I think she's probably fine, but what should I do? Story time about how I was harassed at the gas station. A few years ago when I lived in LA, I would walk everywhere. By the way, you guys want more of my own story time, so here we go. The year was 2016. The victim was me. No, but seriously. I didn't have a car at the time. Actually, I still don't have a car because I can't afford one. So I would take the train or the bus everywhere. On this day, I had an audition in Santa Monica, so I decided to take the bus and then the train. When I got off the train, I walked my cute little tush over to the gas station to grab a bottle of water. I went inside, grabbed my water, and I noticed this guy staring at me. You girls know when a guy is staring at you and he's doing it on purpose. Yeah, that's what he was doing. He wanted me to see him staring at me. I quickly exited and started heading toward my audition, which was like 5 blocks away. I was about 20 feet from the gas station when I hear him yelling at me. He started saying like, hey, do you need a ride? Do you need a ride? And I just said, no, thank you. And I kept walking. Cars were on the street, so I couldn't cross the street just then. So he decided to get in his car and pull up right next to me. As he did this, I could hear him complimenting my body. He started talking about my bum and other parts of my body. I put on my headphones and I just ignored him. But obviously this made him even more upset, right? Because, you know, although I did not put music on because I wanted to hear exactly what was going on. That's when he started saying that I was a bitch and other things for not talking to him. Oh yeah, and then I needed someone to teach me a lesson. Finally, I was able to cross the street and I kept walking. This man turned onto the wrong side of the road so that he could drive right next to me and continue to harass me. He started telling me what he was going to do to me if I actually ever got into his car. I knew that if I responded, it would only accelerate his anger, so I literally did not say anything and kept ignoring him. Finally, some cars were going his way, so he had to get out of the lane and turn around. But this man literally made a U-turn on the street to come back to continue harassing me. I was literally on the verge of tears, but I was like, I'm not gonna let this guy see me cry. Saw a cafe 2 doors down and I decided to walk in. And you better believe he stopped in front of the cafe and just stared inside, waiting for me to come out. Mind you, I had 20 minutes to get to this audition and there was no way I was going to be on time because being on time means being late. But I also did not want him to see where I was going. I went up to the girl at the register and explained to her what was happening. And I just started to cry. Luckily, she was super nice. She gave me a glass of water and just told me to sit down. Luckily, this guy didn't have any patience, so he did drive away. And then I was finally able to walk to the audition, which was like another 3 blocks away. This is why I always used to wear oversized shirts over any dress that I had. Like I have this really big button-up shirt that just hides my body perfectly, but still this happened. No, I didn't have time to get his license plate. I still remember what he looks like and what kind of car he was driving, but honestly, what am I gonna do? Call the cops and be like, hey, this guy harass me? I sometimes literally stand in front of my closet and think, no, I'm not going to wear that unless I'm with my husband. If you have any similar stories, please comment below because I know I'm not the only one. Also, no matter what you're wearing, you should never be approached like that. If you ever find yourself in a situation like that, just go into a store and wait it out. Who cares? It's better than having them follow you to where you live, you know? Just be safe out there. I love you guys. Bye. I secretly hate my husband, but I can't leave him. Disclaimers are not my story time. Listen to me on Instagram. My husband and I have only been married for 2 months. We dated on and off for almost 7 years. So when he finally proposed, I was actually really happy. The problem is that we never lived together before we got married. He never wanted to move in with me when we were dating. He also had this thing where he wouldn't want me to come to his apartment randomly. He would always schedule times where I could hang out with him at his apartment. This all seems suspicious, but I really wanted to marry him, so I just decided to overlook those things. But now that we're married, I see why he didn't want me to come over and why he had all these strange rules. It turns out that he's incredibly messy, lazy, and is super picky about the food he eats. So now that I'm his wife, I'm constantly having to clean up after him. Every single time he goes to the toilet, he always leaves skid marks, or for some reason he always has like explosive poop and it goes everywhere on the bowl. So every single time I go to the bathroom after he does, I'm always having to clean it up. And it makes me so angry that I have to clean up after him that I have begun to hate him. Also, he's super picky about his food. We can never go to restaurants because he never wants anything on the menu. And if we ever do go to a restaurant, we have to go wherever he wants. I love all types of cuisine, especially Indian, Mediterranean, Japanese, but he thinks it's gross. He comes from a very American family. He grew up eating chicken nuggets and grilled cheeses. To him, anything with some spice is way too much. That means I can't cook what I want because he always complains about the smell. Thankfully, he's got an office that's 30 minutes away. So when he leaves, that's when I cook. But I have to make sure to air out the apartment before he gets home. I'm always doing his laundry and cleaning up after him. Every single time he shaves, he leaves hair everywhere. I actually hate this man now. I told him that I don't want to live with him anymore, but he freaked out. He's begging for me to stay, but I'm so unhappy. What should I do?
My boyfriend went on a vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, I look extremely tired because I've been filming for 7 hours. I'm not sad, don't worry. Storytime was sending me an Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 6 months only. Here's the thing, we never bring up our exes, like ever. From my perspective, I thought we had a really healthy relationship. We're both really into fitness, would work out together every single day, and we made time to cook together every single day. He asked me to move in with him 2 months after we started dating, but I said no. I explained to him that I just wasn't ready for that, and he got really upset. That's when things started changing. He began making up excuses about not being able to hang out with me, and sometimes he wouldn't even show up to our gym dates. And I guess one of the mistakes that I made was giving him his space. A few days later, he calls me and tells me that he is in Boston for a work trip. He didn't even tell me he was going on a trip. I just said okay. Then I tracked his location on my phone and it turns out he's in the Bahamas. He forgot that I could track his location. I started investigating and you'll never guess what I found. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on my Instagram. Also, I'm just really tired from filming. I'm not sad, I promise. After checking his location and seeing that he was actually in the Bahamas and not Boston where he told me he was going, I started doing some investigating on Instagram. I scanned his Instagram for people that he tagged. And I finally came across his ex's profile. No, I had never done this before just because I didn't care about his ex. Like I said in part 1, we never talked about our exes. Fortunately, her account was set to private, so I couldn't see her pictures or stories, but I did see on her bio that she was currently in the Bahamas. From his location, I could see what hotel he was staying at. So I called the hotel and asked for his room number. When they put me through, my boyfriend answered the phone. And the first words out of his mouth were, "How did you find me here?" I told him I could see his location and that he must have forgotten. That's when he came up with his lie. His boss asked him to go to the Bahamas for emergency business, and that he didn't have time to call me and tell me about it. In the background, I could hear that somebody opened the door and I heard a woman's voice. He instantly hung up on me. So I called his phone, but he wouldn't answer. In fact, he turned his phone off. It wasn't until 4 days later that he actually showed up to my apartment apologizing. He said his phone broke and that he couldn't get one while he was in the Bahamas. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me an Instagram. After 4 days of not hearing from my stupid boyfriend who was in the Bahamas, finally showed up to my apartment to apologize. I told him not to even bother because I knew that he was with his ex. Then he said, "You're right. I'm not even gonna lie to you." Then he came up with this whole story. He clearly had 4 days to think about it. Told me that his ex-girlfriend's boyfriend died and that she was in need of his help. She asked him to go to the Bahamas to spread her boyfriend's ashes. And of course, being the gentleman that he is, he said yeah, and that the only reason he didn't tell me was because he didn't want me to get jealous. So I asked him to confirm his story. I told him to call his ex and put her on speaker, and he refused. He said that I was being toxic and that doing that to his poor ex would bring up all the feelings she had from her boyfriend's death, and that she was grieving and I needed to respect her space. Gaslighting much? I told him I wouldn't believe him and then I kicked him out. He told me I was being so insensitive towards him. So I asked his ex on Instagram if the whole story was true. She hasn't opened the message and I'm still waiting for her to reply. It's been a few days since that happened and my boyfriend keeps coming back to my apartment with flowers and champagne. He keeps apologizing and asking me not to break up with him. I know you're all thinking I should just leave him, but I really, really love him. And maybe the story is true. He shouldn't have lied. I can't confirm his story. What should I do?
Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm sending me an Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, "Wow, you're growing into your body," or "Wow, you got great hips." He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's to me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. It's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting, and that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13, and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.